Hello and welcome back. Welcome back. I'm John, an old YouTuber and PC gamer. Let's continue my 32-bit computing videos uploading. And the next one is a lot more longer. I have to look my computer's level. The next one is 64-bit computing. That's 16 pages. And I think should do this one after that. I have not write it on my list. Should do the X, what's the x86 architecture, what it is. That's more about x86, something about x86 instructions. I could, but let's wait to look at that. Let's just continue this. And I had a break with this computer PDF. I had a break close to 1 month, so I like to continue. So that's 16 pages. That can take, I don't know, a lot more than 1 hour. So I put my papers back. So the cable to my mouse, I have to hold my hand to do this. Because my mouse's cable is hitting the pile of papers. So let's just continue. Yes, and I'm on diet. I'm trying to lose a lot of weight. So I can be a little bit tired and dizzy because I don't eat so much food. And I lost soon I lost 30 kilos. So today I'm not eating any food today, but I'm going to cook hot food today. It's Saturday. I'm cooking fish and rice. No, that's not fish. That's fish from the deep freeze. Last summer, the 28th July, I was 133 kilos. And last time, the 27th May, last month, I was 105.7. And in 13 days, I'm going to weight again. Yes. No, I not like fish much, but it needs to be, I don't know how you say that. It's like fish fingers you can buy in supermarkets. It's not fresh fish. It's fish from my deep freeze, like this one. I don't know how to call it. No, I like fish and chips, like in United Kingdom they're eating fish and chips. Oh, that's fish like this one. I can eat that, but I don't like, but of course I like tuna and I like shrimp. So that's not true, I'm not liking fish, but I'm from Denmark, we're not eating so much fish. We're eating most meats. But of course, shrimps some bread I like, and I like tuna. Like this one, sliced tuna stick, I like that. I use this for salads. I have many different kinds of tuna, so that's not true. I not like fish. But like raw fish, like sushi, I don't like. That's not good to eat raw fish. Yes, but let's continue. No, you have to fry or cook fish because you can have some small worms inside the fish meat called trichritter. I don't know how you say that in English, but in some fish meat you can have some small worms, I think. This is why you need to cook it or fry it. Yes, but I need half a minute to do myself ready, because I'm still very heavy, so I'm damaged my back. My back is hurting. If I'm sitting too many hours on my bed, I have to lay down and have a pillow in my back. And the blankets, yes, I'm start to getting a bit old. I'm 56. I'm soon age 60. So I like to read this myself. I like to learn about this, but I cannot remember all this. Of course, there's too many information. Read to the end of the documents.
64-bit computing. In computer architecture, 64-bit integers, memory addresses, or other data units are those that are 64-bit, 8-octet, wide. Also, 64-bit central processing unit, CPU, and arithmetic logic unit, ALU, architectures are those that are based on processor registers, address buses, or data buses of that size. 64-bit microcomputers are computers in which 64-bit microprocessors are the norm. From the software perspective, 64-bit computing means the use of machine code with 64-bit virtual memory addresses. However, not all 64-byte instruction sets support full 64-bit virtual memory addresses, x86-64 and ARMv8, for example, support only 48 bits of virtual address, with the remaining 16 bits of the virtual address required to be all 0s or all 1s, and several 64-bit instruction sets support fewer than 64 bits of physical memory address. The term 64-bit describes a generation of computers in which 64-bit processors are the norm. 64 bits is a word size that defines certain classes of computer architecture, buses, memory, and CPUs and, by extension, the software that runs on them. 64-bit CPUs have been used in supercomputers since the 1970s, Cray 1, 1975, and in reduced instruction set computers, RISC, based workstations and servers since the early 1990s, notably the MIPS R4000, R8000, and R10000. The Digital Equipment Corporation, December, Alpha, the Sun Microsystems Ultra SPARC, and the IBM RS64 and Power 3 and later IBM Power microprocessors. In 2003, 64-bit CPUs were introduced to the, formerly 32-bit, mainstream personal computer market in the form of x86-64 processors and the PowerPC G5, and were introduced in 2012. 1. Into the ARM architecture targeting smartphones and tablet computers, first sold on the 20th of September, 2013, in iPhone 5s powered by the ARMv8 Apple A7 system on a chip, SoC. A 64-bit register can hold any of 264, over 18 quintillion or 1.81019, different values. The range of integer values that can be stored in 64 bits depends on the integer representation used. With the two most common representations, the range is 0 through 18,446,744,073,709,551,615, 264 for representation as an unsigned binary number, and 9,223,372,036,854,775,808, 263, through 9,223,372,036,854,775,807, 263 for representation as 2's complement. Hence, A processor with 64-bit memory addresses can directly access 264 bytes, 16x bytes or EIB, of byte addressable memory. With no further qualification, a 64-bit computer architecture generally has integer and addressing processor registers that are 64 bits wide, allowing direct support for 64-bit data types and addresses. However, a CPU might have external data buses or address buses with different sizes from the registers, even larger. The 32-bit Pentium had a 64-bit data bus, for instance. 2. The term may also refer to the size of low-level data types, such as 64-bit floating-point arithmetic numbers. Contents. Architectural implications. History: 64-bit data timeline, 64-bit address timeline, 64-bit operating system timeline. Limits of processors. 64-bit applications, 32-bit vs 64-bit. Pros and cons. Software availability. 64-bit data models. Current 64-bit architectures. See also. References. External links. Architectural implications. Processor registers are typically divided into several groups: integer, floating point, single instruction, multiple data, SIMD, control, and often special registers for address arithmetic, which may have various uses and names such as address, index, or base registers. However, in modern designs, these functions are often performed by more general-purpose integer registers. In most processors, only integer or address registers can be used to address data in memory. The other types of registers cannot. The size of these registers therefore normally limits the amount of directly addressable memory, even if there are registers such as floating-point registers that are wider. Most high-performance 32-bit and 64-bit processors, some notable exceptions are older or embedded ARM architecture, ARM, and 32-bit MIPS architecture, MIPS, CPUs, have integrated floating-point hardware, which is often, but not always, based on 64-bit units of data. For example, although the x86/x87 architecture has instructions able to load and store 64-bit and 32-bit floating-point values in memory, the internal floating-point data and register format is 80 bits wide, while the general-purpose registers are 32 bits wide. In contrast, the 64-bit Alpha family uses a 64-bit floating-point data and register format, and 64-bit integer registers. History. Many computer instruction sets are designed so that a single integer register can store the memory address to any location in the computer's physical or virtual memory. Therefore, the total number of addresses to memory is often determined by the width of these registers. The IBM System /360 of the 1960s was an early 32-bit computer. It had 32-bit integer registers, although it only used the low-order 24 bits of a word for addresses, resulting in a 16 MB, 10,242 bytes, address space. 32-bit supermini computers, such as December VAX, became common in the 1970s, and 32-bit microprocessors, such as the Motorola 68000 family and the 32-bit members of the x86 family, starting with the Intel 80386, appeared in the mid-1980s, making 32 bits something of a de facto consensus as a convenient register size. A 32-bit address register meant that 232 addresses, or 4 GB of random access memory, RAM, could be referenced. When these architectures were devised, 4 GB of memory was so far beyond the typical amounts, 4 MB, in installations, that this was considered to be enough headroom for addressing. 4.29 billion addresses were considered an appropriate size to work with for another important reason. 4.29 billion integers are enough to assign unique references to most entities in applications like databases. Some supercomputer architectures of the 1970s and 1980s, such as the Cray 1.3, used registers up to 64 bits wide, and supported 64-bit integer arithmetic, although they did not support 64-bit addressing. In the mid-1980s, Intel i864 development began, culminating in a too late 5 for Windows NT 1989 release. The i860 had 32-bit integer registers and 32-bit addressing, so it was not a fully 64-bit processor, although its graphics unit supported 64-bit integer arithmetic. 6. However, 32 bits remained the norm until the early 1990s, when the continual reductions in the cost of memory led to installations with amounts of RAM approaching 4 GB, and the use of virtual memory spaces exceeding the 4 GB ceiling became desirable for handling certain types of problems. In response, MIPS and December developed 64-bit microprocessor architectures, initially for high-end workstation and server machines. By the mid-1990s, HAL Computer Systems, Sun Microsystems, IBM, Silicon Graphics, and Hewlett-Packard had developed 64-bit architectures for their workstation and server systems. A notable exception to this trend were mainframes from IBM, which then used 32-bit data and 31-bit address sizes. The IBM mainframes did not include 64-bit processors until 2000. During the 1990s, several low-cost 64-bit microprocessors were used in consumer electronics and embedded applications. Notably, the Nintendo 64/7 and the PlayStation 2 had 64-bit microprocessors before their introduction in personal computers. High-end printers, network equipment and industrial computers also used 64-bit microprocessors, such as the quantum effect devices R5000. 64-bit computing started to trickle down to the personal computer desktop from 2003 onward, when some models in Apple's Macintosh line switched to PowerPC 970 processors, termed G5 by Apple, and Advanced Micro Devices, AMD, released its first 64-bit x86-64 processor. 64-bit data timeline. 1961 IBM delivers the IBM 7030 Stretch supercomputer, which uses 64-bit data words and 32 or 64-bit instruction words. 1974 Control Data Corporation launches the CDC Star 100 vector supercomputer, which uses a 64-bit word architecture. Prior CDC systems were based on a 60-bit architecture. International Computers Limited launches the ICL 2900 series with 32-bit, 64-bit, and 128-bit 2's complement integers, 64-bit and 128-bit floating point, 32-bit, 64-bit, and 128-bit packed decimal and a 128-bit accumulator register. The architecture has survived through a succession of ICL and Fujitsu machines. The latest is the Fujitsu Supernova, which emulates the original environment on 64-bit Intel processors. 1976 Cray Research delivers the first Cray 1 supercomputer, which is based on a 64-bit word architecture and will form the basis for later Cray vector supercomputers. 1983 ELX-C launches the ELX-C 6400 parallel mini supercomputer. The ELX-C architecture has 64-bit data registers but a 32-bit address space. 1989 Intel introduces the Intel i860 Reduced Instruction Set Computer, RISC, processor. Marketed as a 64-bit microprocessor, it had essentially a 32-bit architecture, enhanced with a 3 graphics unit capable of 64-bit integer operations. 8. 1993 Atari introduces the Atari Jaguar video game console, which includes some 64-bit wider data